Hello, welcome to the Untangled Knitting Podcast. If this is your first time joining us, today is a very special episode. So usually this is a YouTube channel collection of videos where I talk about projects that I'm making and projects that I'm dreaming of making and projects that sometimes I've actually completed and made. But today, I have the extreme pleasure of introducing a kind of new element. It's a bit of an interview with one of my kind of most favorite people I've met through knitting. And that is Jen. She's an incredible designer who has brought forward some beautiful patterns. And she's also contributed to a really wonderful part of, I think, the conversation around knitting and how we think about our bodies and think about modifications. She reached out to me because as we had gotten to be kind of online internet friends, she saw that I was making the beautiful Jessie Maede Designs Gr8 Gingham Raglan, which has become such an incredible piece. I absolutely love it. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And at the end of the episode, I'll come back and talk about the garment some more. And she wanted to let me know that she had a resource for adding in short row shaping. I am an intermediate knitter, I would say, but I'm not an advanced technician of any kind. And so I knew that I wanted to do this very simple kind of, frankly, like a beginner's level colorwork sweater. I think you could absolutely do this as your first colorwork project, 100%. In fact, I think it's a great standard for an introduction to colorwork. And she let me know that if I wanted to modify the top of the sweater, that she had a resource for that. I jumped at the chance because I've never done anything so bold before. And frankly, I was curious about how knitting math worked. So we started corresponding. She sent me this amazing resource, which is a worksheet where you can use your own body's measurements to discern how you might modify a bottom-up raglan sweater to give yourself some neck shaping. I had the dream of creating kind of a boat ballerina neck on this sweater because I wanted to wear it cropped. I wanted to accentuate the arm length, and I thought that that could be a really good fit for me and for my wardrobe. So she helped me put together all the math, and we are gonna walk you through that process. You also get a chance to learn a little bit more about Jen and her real perspective and vision for making our own clothes. And it's definitely one that I aspire to. You will also notice if you stick around that the sound quality on the Zoom is kind of sort of terrible. Jen's is much better than mine, and I apologize profusely. It is what it is. And if it bothers you, I say, please just mute me because you really don't need to hear from me anymore. She's really the expert. I ask a few dumb questions and kind of just talk about how great the pattern is. And that's about it. So again, I apologize for the sound quality on my end of the video, but I do think that there's some pretty interesting content in there. And I also think, one of the things I talk about in the video too is how we kind of think about or respond to numbers. And for me, this process, working through modifications for something that I really loved, was for me a way of working through some of my past, which was thinking that I wasn't a good math student, that I didn't really understand how equations worked, or I took a little break there. I clearly, this is kind of emotional stuff, because I think that we internalize as kids so much about what we're good at, right? And then you wake up and you're almost 40 and you're like, oh wait, I can do this. This is not something I'm quote unquote bad at. So if you've ever had those kinds of feelings, I really encourage you, specifically about math, I would encourage you to use your knitting as a way to work through that, just because it was so effective for me. So that's a little bit of my side of the story. But again, I will see you guys on the other end. I'll also say that there's quite a longer stretch. It's about 14 and a half minutes where you are looking at Jen's, what's it called? Worksheet. We just shared our screen on the Zoom, so you're just kind of looking at that. Our faces are there, but they're a little bit smaller. They're a little wee. But I promise that we do come back. So if you want to stick with us, we will see you on the other side of that stretch where we're really going through the math and the numbers and trying to make sure people feel really comfortable kind of using the resource. So I will see you after we say goodbye to Jen, and we'll talk a little bit about my finished object. So should we just go for it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hello, Jen.
Hi, Lily.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited that it's almost cold. I'm really ready. I'm not a summer baby. I mean, I was born in the summer, but I do not love summer.
You don't love summer. She's not here for it.
I'm not here for it.
I feel like I'm the luckiest summer knitter because I get this crazy Bay Area fog. And so if you ever want to be cold in August, you literally just like drive 20 minutes to the fog and you're fine.
Yep.
You can get it. You can get that sweater weather.
I used to love that in Oregon, right? Like you just go out to the coast, get cold.
It's
right
cold.
there. You can have it. Yeah.
On a chilly beach walk. So we're not wearing our knit, so we won't do the like traditional like knitting podcast.
Yeah.
What are you wearing moment?
No.
And we can get right into it. People who are here, since this is the Untangled knitting podcast, I think I'm going to film a little intro so we won't get into me. But can you spend a few moments introducing yourself, and maybe we can talk about how we met and kind of give folks an understanding of why we're here, what we're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Jen Parroccini. I am a knitwear designer, consultant, and grader. I like to say that I'm in business because I feel like knitting sweaters can change the world, right? Like when we knit sweaters, we have the opportunity, when we make our own clothes, we have the opportunity to live all of our values, turn our backs on fast fashion, heal our relationship with our bodies, have a different relationship with the world and the resources that we're using, and, support and uplift garment workers, right? And like do work that respects the work of women around the world. And so that's why I'm in business. And some of the ways that I try and bring that reality into existence is through designing size inclusive garments that are ready for knitters to make their own. And by helping other designers who share those values with their grading problems, either by directly grading for them or by consulting on grading and fit with them. I also do teaching for knitters, right? Because the other part of the equation is, as knitters, we need to know what to do to make those garments our own for our own bodies. Any garment pattern that is graded for sizes is going to be based on a set of averages and assumptions, and it's really important as knitters that we know how to make those garments our own so that they get worn and not just tucked into a drawer. So that's a little bit about me. I've been at this for coming up on 3 years now. And in my background, I have been a tailor, a costumer, and a CPI. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow, that's awesome. And Jen and I met through a pretty amazing community called the Fiber Business Collective, which is run by Anastasia, and she's a really amazing convener of, she brings people together is kind of how I think of her and her work. And she's also a great consultant for folks in the fiber business who are looking to reach bigger audiences and also to connect with folks. So I'm really so happy that you're here and you're going to get to teach us how to think of neck shaping and garment making in this new way. So I'll start by saying that this is my second bottom up raglan sweater. And what we're talking about today is the Gr8 Gingham Raglan.
which is a really beautiful color work pattern by Jessie May of Jessie May Designs. It kind of was, I think we can call it like a viral sensation. I think a lot of folks saw this on the internet and wanted to be a part of it. It looks really beautiful. And I think one of the things that's so appealing is that it does look really different on different people's bodies, and depending on the yarn you use, it's a really flexible, and I think in a lot of ways, a really flexible pattern. I was really excited to knit it. I bought the pattern immediately when it was launched. I spent a long time kind of finding what I thought would be the right yarn for the piece. I'm making it with Spincycle's dyed in the wool, which is what is called for. But instead of the sport weight that the designer used, I'm using Camellia Fiber Co.'s sport weight, which has a little bit bigger twist to it. It's not as fluffy as the Spincycle. The sport weight that it's called for, I'm also pretty familiar with. It's the Ritual Dyes sport, which is really nice. It actually probably pairs better in some ways with the Spincycle, but I really wanted the Spincycle to be more dominant. And so after doing some swatching, I found that I had a harder time making sure that the Spincycle, especially in these sections, was like in the 1x1 color, was popping nicely. And so this is a bit smaller, it's a bit tighter, less toothy and fluffy, has a little bit more, sheen to it as you might expect from a less rustic yarn. But I actually think it pairs really well because for me in my knitting, I wanted to make sure that the color shifting yarn was really discernible. So those are the kind of choices that I'm really confident making, right? Like for me, when I look at patterns and I think of customization, I really think about color and I really think about texture. And that's where I feel like, oh yeah, I got this. But when it comes to the math, I really start to get nervous. And I think that for me, a lot of that comes from my history of literally being told I was bad at math. And, as a kid, I felt like I heard multiple times from multiple teachers, some of whom I'm sure had the best, of intentions, like, oh, you're really smart, you're just not good at math. And I feel like it took a lot of kind of unlearning for me to kind of even be able to approach even basic math and science in a way that like made me feel more comfortable and confident. And one of the kind of processes I'm still undertaking as a knitter, I think, is my kind of first modifications that I had to do with numbers and gauge. I just went into it and I kind of forgot it was math, and I had some success, and I was like, oh, wait, I just like made an equation. I just like literally made a little like algebra equation. I must have remembered something from 8th grade math when someone said I was bad at it, right? And so, for me, I kind of feel like this is another kind of healing that I'm doing, is like feeling like I can work with numbers and be creative in the same way that I know I feel more confident working with materials and colors and being creative. Like this is another, I don't know. Yeah, it's another learning point for me. And, I think one of the things that you and I have connected with is that we both have young children who are in their early days of elementary school. And I heard something recently that really, really hit me hard. It was that our brains like nothing more than doing something and getting better at it. Like that gives our brains like influxes, some of the biggest influxes in our lives of dopamine, of serotonin, of these feel good chemicals and emotions. And, watching my daughter, practice something and getting better at it as a 5-year-old, I feel like I'm starting to kind of take that on more and be more conscious of that being a big part of knitting for me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm excited to kind of approach our math worksheet together because, and I'm going to stop talking. I know I'm rambling now. As much as folks have loved knitting this piece, I've seen so many really, really beautiful garments. I think a lot of people have trouble with the neckline, both aesthetically and then sensorily. It feels less like an intentional funnel where, you know, there are some funnel neck patterns where you really have a big seam going up the side and there's like kind of a dedicated space for the neck and the collar stands up around it with a lot of intention. And this feels much more like, oh, it just stops. And for me, I feel like that's not how I want to present myself to the world. And so I know that there have been other ways to modify, but can you tell us a little bit about your worksheet and kind of how that came to be? Because when you said to me, oh, I have something that can modify that neckline, I immediately said, yes, done. I mean, I think that like there was no even time for the bubbles to appear on the chat and Instagram. It was just like, I want to do it. Where is it? Let me do it.
Yeah.
Show me do it.
Well, I think your experience with math is one that's gendered and that a lot of women have had, right? And I think that a lot of people have a lot of isolation around that because they don't realize that it's an entire generational phenomenon. And it's just one more way in which knitting is political and it shapes the world that we're living in. So it's definitely healing. Also, I think what you're saying is it's a testament to how theory often is less useful to us than doing something, right? Like so many years before I started making my own modifications, I was like, oh my God, I'm a bad knitter because I never modify anything. I just like would rather deal with it not fitting well until I was like, okay, it's time. And then suddenly I was like, oh, this makes sense. Like it's like common sense once you turn it into a word problem, right? So I hope that other knitters can have an experience like that too. And you know what we're going to talk about today, adding some shaping to a neckline that doesn't have one. We're going to put some tight parameters on it. We're going to talk about like doing it for one type of construction, you know, and adding just one thing. But, you know, there are also a lot of ways that we can make modifications where we don't have to jump all the way in, right? You can add a modification to your neck on this sweater, and then next sweater you can experiment with less shaping. Like there's nothing wrong with being the kind of knitter, as I was for many years, who just enjoys knitting and doesn't care that much about fit. That's a totally okay way to be a knitter. You know, and I think, you know, the one thing I want to say about this pattern and the neckline that's written into it is that, you know, the designer Jessie has made it very clear on her website that this is how the neckline is shaped. Her photos show it. It might not be to everyone's cup of tea, but when we are knitting a designer's pattern or using a dyer's yarn or any of those things, we're making something in collaboration with each other, right? We are all making one big body of hand knit art that you could stack to the moon, right? So I've had people say, I feel like it's weird to modify a designer's pattern. I feel like it's insulting to them. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. A pattern it's a recipe. You need to make it your own. That's the design community. I had a voice injury this spring. I'm still recovering a little bit.
Sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. It was never painful. It just doesn't work very well. So yeah, I think we've all had the experience of putting on our shirt backwards and knowing immediately that it's backwards because the front of our body is not the same as the back of our body. And if somebody's considering whether or not they might want to add a neckline to this pattern or any other number of patterns, because there are a handful in the market right now that are really beautiful, but because they have color work, they don't have a neckline added. So if somebody is wondering if this might be for them, my recommendation would be to take a raglan that you have, put it on backwards and see if you're comfortable, because that's what this will feel like.
Great.
And there are a couple different things to consider. So the neckline in a raglan has some built-in shaping, right? Because we have those shoulders here. And so if you have a raglan that has really deep shoulders that come to here, you might not need anything else. But those aren't very common because that tends to make a line right here that a lot of women don't love. And so we don't see that a lot, but the wider that shoulder cast on or bind off, depending if you're going up or down is, the less neckline you'll need to add to make room for your neck. Make sense so far?
Yeah, you got me. I'm here. I'm with you.
You're good. I'm preaching to the choir, I know. So I'm going to turn to the side because a lot of us, I think, when we look at ourselves up head on, which is how we usually see ourselves, our necks come from the top of our shoulders and go straight up. They don't. Front of my neck is here. Can you see that? Back of my neck is here. That's a big vertical difference, right? So we need to make room for that. It goes right here. Now, today I want to talk about how to do it with short rows. And I just want to say you don't have to use short rows. You can also bind off. We're going to talk about going bottom up, but we don't have to do it that way either. And I forget what your question is, but I feel like I'm running away with the content. So
no, this is fantastic. No, we're like totally on track. No, we're totally on track. Okay. So, all right, we've got our raglan. I'm just going like back to basic. I attached my sleeves, which I'm quite proud of. I'm not gonna lie. Like I said, this is only my second bottom up raglan. And one of the things that she does, which I want to just like majorly shout out, is there's a mirroring effect along the raglan sleeve with the color work, which I think is super effective. And I think it's like one of the things that makes it look super polished and I really love. And it's easy to do in pattern. So it's one of those things where you're like, oh, that seems really complicated, but it actually worked out really well. So now where I've stopped is where I think we're going to start with the worksheet. And can we just like dive right in? Is that okay? Okay, awesome. Great. I'm going to share, should we share the screen?
Yeah, share the screen.
Okay.
I'm going to add a bit of context. So what we are going to be working from today is I have put out a blog post with an associated worksheet that knitters can use to add neckline shaping to any raglan, right? Like I said, there's a handful of them out there. And the reason that these often get left out is because a lot of knitters really don't want to mess around with knitting circular short rows in the rounding color work. And so designers really are serving a knitter here when they do this, the knitter who doesn't want to do that, which is a legitimate population of knitters who want that. So so this is just an option. I have a lot of sensory issues and would be very, very unable to wear something that didn't have neckline shaping. And I know that there are a lot of people in my audience who have it. So that's why I created this resource. It's free. It's on my blog. I'm sure Lily will share a link, but that's what we'll be working from if anybody is like, where do I get that? And what are you guys talking about?
Awesome. So I am going to now share the screen. And sorry, team. I just found this. Sure. Sorry, Tim.
Takes as long as it takes, doesn't it?
It will. And oh, it's because it doesn't want us to record and share screen. But guess what? You say you can. You can do it. I'm giving you all the permission. Okay, we're going to have to edit and jump back in, okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. There she is, indeed. Okay, so this is the PDF of a worksheet that is linked on a really informative blog post. So if you also are interested in kind of finding out more about what Jen was just describing, you can see it all written out in the blog post as well. So if you're furiously taking notes, don't worry, it's all there. You can put your pen and pencils down and just kind of take it all in, and then go back and you can go through the specifics with Jen. So when I saw this, I was like, oh, this is all information I already have. This is exciting.
Yeah, and our goal really is just to make a little scoop. I'm using short rows because a lot of people like those. Short rows have a limitation, which is that you can't make like a scoop. You can only make a crew neck because you can't work columns, straight parallel lines here. But the same math would work to bind off and do decreases. So whatever somebody's preference is, if they get really dizzied when it comes to doing short rows, or they don't want to do short rows and color work, the bind off and decrease method works just the same.
Awesome. So what we have right here is our gauge, right? Our stitches per inch, our rows per inch. And then when it says stitches in the shoulder, can you just describe, like, one of the things that we talked about is that's this part, right? Like the shoulder is it the end or the beginning?
It's the top of the sleeve, right
Right.
before any adjustments you make for trim.
Okay. So basically, like where this would go to the very top. And that information is usually found in a pattern right before the like ribbing, right?
That's right.
And so
it'll be the last set of stitch counts. That's right.
Exactly. And so what we're going to do to, I should just say, is I will not, this is a paid pattern, and I will not be getting into any of the specifics of what the details are in the pattern. We're just going to be talking in generalities and kind of showing you how Jen and I did the math for this piece, just to kind of make sure that that's super clear. So I'm telling you where I found all of this information, and it was all really easy to find. Both on the pattern and then on myself, because what I didn't realize as I was doing this is I was like, oh, this isn't just for like anyone. This is for me. This is like neck shaping based on my measurements, which was like kind of exciting, actually. I didn't have to like fit it into a certain thing. So anyway, we'll get there.
It's what you want. Yeah.
It's amazing. I was like, oh, no, this is like a custom piece now. So these are all information that you can find based on your garment and your pattern, those stitches in the shoulder, and then divided by stitches per inch, which you already have up here. And I'm just using the little pointer because it's helpful for me. But then talk to us a little bit about what is this is the starting neck depth. And then how would we know what our desired neck depth is?
Yeah. Let me do that. I want to also say real quick, I've given this in inches. You can just convert it to, like, you don't need to do anything to be in centimeters. You just would have a much smaller fraction of stitches per centimeter. And it's important not to round things because you don't have to make it fit into a pattern. It doesn't have to be an even number of stitches per inch. So don't round any of your gauge numbers. So how deep we want our neck to be is going to be, however, like, it's just going to be a matter of preference, right? So we want to think about like where our neck line wants to be and then how deep our trim is. So if we want our final garment to hit kind of right at the collarbones and we know we're going to work an inch of ribbing, we drop down an additional inch, and that's the depth we want. And we would want to measure that from the middle of your inside neckline here and drop straight down to that desired point, straight towards the floor in a vertical line. And so we would figure out where we want the final to be, and then we would add the trim depth, and that's going to give us our desired neck depth. Now, like I was talking about earlier, our sleeves are already going to contribute some depth. So 1/2 of your sleeves, and you would calculate the stitches in shoulder divided by the stitches per inch will give you how many inches this final amount is, and 1/2 of that is already going to be coming from the middle of your neck down towards the bottom of your neck.
So that's what this number is for.
That's your,
Got
yes.
it.
So you'll calculate that starting neck depth and the amount of neck depth you want, and then you'll know how much you need to add to get to your desired neck.
Amazing. So then what we have to do then is add in how many stitches are already here, right?
Yep, okay. We'll figure out how many rows this is that we're going to work with, ideally. And because it's short rows, we might have to do a little finessing. We'll have to do a little bit of finessing just to make sure that that we're working all those rows. But it's a piece of cake. You just go back and make a little adjustment if you need to. So yeah, so then we're going to say, well, how many stitches are in the front neck? And usually in a seamless raglan, it's the same in almost every sweater that's a raglan. It's the same in the front and back. But that's how many stitches we know we have to scoop out to land nice at the shoulder, right? We want to get rid of all those stitches. We don't want to be working any of those on this top row. Now, I want to talk for just a second about short row shaping and the actual goal of short row shaping, because this is like a passion topic of mine.
Great.
You will hear people say shaping the back neck, short row shaping raises the back neck. It doesn't raise the back neck. What it does is it finishes your sweater. And you turn away from stitches in that scoop. You'll work up to it and then you'll turn around and then you'll come to the other side and you'll turn around. Well, all you're doing is you're really just bringing that sweater in the back up to where it belongs. If you didn't do those, look at your sweater. Like that's where your sweater would end and it wouldn't be a sweater, right? So you're going to finish the sweater. You're not going to raise the back neck, but you're going to avoid knitting some stitches so that you get a neckline shape. And so we know how many rows we want to make that avoidance on. And now it's time to decide, like, if we're going to avoid knitting all these stitches on the top row. And down here at the beginning, we're going to knit some of them, but not all of them. So now we're going to plan that shaping. And it really depends on the shape of the neckline that you want to create. And we will start by avoiding knitting, or if you were binding off, you would say by binding off some stitches right down here at the base of the neck. So we'll figure out how many stitches we don't want to knit anymore down there. We'll call that bottom neck stitches. If it's very small, you'll end up with like kind of a much rounder, deeper neckline. If you only have a few rows to work with, you would probably go a little wider. I've given a range of 40 to 55%, but it's really subjective. And this is the number you're most likely need to finesse to make sure that your rows work out later. So if you had a wider, it would be a little more like a boat neck, right? Like it would be shallower and a little bit more squared off. And so that's how we'll come up with our initial bottom neck stitches. How's that so far?
So far, so good. I think for me, the place where when I was kind of doing this solo, the rate made sense to me because rate seemed like, I actually really liked that word because it was like, how much distance am I going to go over? And instead of it being like time, it was like number of stitches, right? So it kind of made sense to me in terms of using the term rate. And I apologize if there's any background noise. We have some really active construction sometimes on my little street here. And so here, I'm just going to pop us in the middle. When it comes to the rate to shape out, what is A and what is B?
Yeah, so when you're working a nice little curve, you want to come wider and then shallower to make it look like a half circle. And so we will get rid of 2 stitches at once on the first few rows, and then we'll just go up 1 stitch. And so what that means is as you're working your short rows, you'll be knitting along and you'll see that double stitch coming. And for rate A, you'll make sure that you stop 1 stitch before it so that you are avoiding 2 stitches. You won't work the double stitch or the one before it. And when you're working at rate B, you'll work right up to that double stitch. So you'll only not work 1 more stitch, if that makes sense. It's the equivalent of decreasing 2 and then decreasing 1.
Got it. Okay, awesome. And then what we want is that we want A and B to be basically the same, right?
Yeah, roughly half.
Roughly half. Okay.
You want to get rid of half of the stitches in rate A 2 at a time, and you want to get rid of half of the stitches 1 at a time.
Awesome. Okay, so that's that detail down below, right? So if the neck shaping rows is smaller than the number of rows, we have to kind of even those out.
Yeah, earlier we figured out how many rows we had, right?
Right.
And because we're working short rows, we have to use every one of them, and we can't use more and we can't use less.
Right. So we really need those numbers to be the same. And if they're not, we should go back and maybe adjust how deep we want our neck or adjust how many stitches we're going to be removing in order to make sure that those numbers are the same, right?
That's right. Yeah, you got it exactly right.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you. Okay, and now once we have that, now we're just like making our own knitting pattern, basically.
Yeah, we are.
We just get to like plug and play.
That's right.
Okay, can you talk us through the next page?
Yeah, so I've used German short rows because, confession, I can't make a pretty wrap and turn. Tried for 15 years. I can't do it. I don't know how anybody does it, especially in the round. cancel the whole thing. German short rows forever. So for people who are unfamiliar with the technique, you work to the last stitch that you want to work, and you turn your work, and you just give it a yank and flip it over the top so it pulls up and looks like 2 stitches, which is exactly the same mistake you made when you were learning to knit and then you knit both legs separately and accidentally increased and couldn't understand why your scarf got wider. But now we're doing it on purpose. We're wrapping that stitch over the needle so that it has 2 legs. But then when we see it again, we're just going to knit those 2 together as one. And it's totally seamless, and it makes the math really easy. So what I've given you on this page is the opportunity to write your own pattern. So you will take a look at your existing pattern, and you'll see how many raglan rows you're going to work. So you've split for the arms, or excuse me, you've added your arms, because we're going bottom up. You've added your arms. And then there's a certain number of rows you're going to work before you get to some instruction that says change to your ribbing needle. That's right. And we already know how many rows we've decided are in our shaping. We've got to take out one more for the row when we like kind of at the end, we'll need to work one to capture all those double legs together.
Right.
So we'll subtract that number of rows from the total number of rows you need to work. And you might need to do a little math with your pattern if there's a shaping rate, like if it's, decrease, work a decrease row every 10th row 5 times, then every 8th row 4 times. You might need to do a little math to see how many rows are in your yoke. But once you have it, you'll just subtract that number of neck shaping rows that we calculated earlier, and then one more. And then that's how many rows. You'll follow the instructions in your pattern. And then you'll start following these instructions at the same time as the rest of your pattern instructions. So the first thing what we're going to do is we're going to figure out the halfway point here. So once you've knit those number of rows, you're just going to take a look at what you have. You don't need to do this ahead of time. You're going to look at the number of stitches between those raglan increases on your sweater, and you're going to use a marker, a removable stitch marker. If it's odd, you're going to mark that middle stitch. If it's even, you'll slip it right between those 2, right? And then you're just going to work to a few stitches between that marker, turn, and then you're going to come all the way back around the other side to the same number before the marker. Right. And so you're just going to fill in the numbers that we calculated from the pattern and work back and forth, avoiding working here until you're done. And at the very end, you'll pick up all those little German double leg stitches, and you should have the same number of stitches in the sides.
Right.
And then you'll follow the instructions as written for your neckline. You might need to pick up a different number of rib stitches.
Right. But as long as you could even turn your ribbing into, a different rib if you wanted to. That's something that's always been customizable. Oh, I love it.
Right.
Okay. For me, this is so freeing. I think there's just something really I don't know. I think our creativity is one of the ways that we can kind of feel free. And for someone who's, I don't know, I'm a bit of a rule follower. There's something that is really helpful about having this kind of structure, even when I'm doing something different. I get a little nervous about going too kind of off on my own. And so for me, this is just incredibly helpful because it feels really freeing, even though I'm kind of making something. And I never thought I would say math was freeing in my entire life, but genuinely, that's how this feels. This feels really, really good.
And knitting is a lot of work. You've put a lot of work into the sweater, and the idea of ripping out the yoke after you do it is that's not an easy pill to swallow. So it is good to have some guidance as you move through, but also knitting, you can fudge a lot of stuff.
You can. And I also think that it's so important in terms of feeling comfortable and feeling if one of the reasons that we are making our own clothes and that we are focusing on this as a kind of self-care and community care is wanting to be comfortable and also wanting to feel confident in how we present ourselves, and that how we present ourselves can be a really important way of having that sense of freedom, having a sense of control, and autonomy. Right? I think so much of, again, talking to my kids about what they wear has been so instructive to me. My daughter loves fancy dresses, and I will never forget when this was during the I like to call peak pandemic, where we all like completely locked into our homes. And she was 3 at the time and had these like really nice, fancy shoes that her grandmother had bought her. And she just wanted to wear these shoes all day, every day. I was like, yeah, wear the fancy shoes.
Please
Wear
do,
the fancy
girl.
shoes. Please.
Mm-hmm.
She wore those things so hard. I mean, these were not like jellies. These were like nice shoes. You could like basically touch her foot through the bottom. She wore them
Wonderful.
every single day.
I love
And
that.
I want to feel that way about my stuff. I want to feel like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to put
Agency.
that on. Yes,
Agency. Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And that like when I do this, when I wear this, it makes me feel like me. And that's like, I just love that sense again of like, yeah, agency, autonomy, freedom. Like these are things that matter for us and they matter for us as women. And the way that we look can feel sometimes so out of our control or so like wanting to be controlled by outside forces, that there is something deeply political about that, that gets to something really real. And like I just love, I'm constantly inspired by you, and I think that it's really changed the way that I think about dressing myself and like how I also relate to this craft that I picked up because it was kind of something I had done a lot as a kid and in my early 20s. And, maybe I'll make something for myself, and then has kind of really changed the way I think I orient to the universe in some ways. And, you know, one of the things that the reason that I have a YouTube channel, which I still think is kind of wild, is like I wanted to practice feeling more comfortable, like putting myself out into the world. And it's still something that I think we all can practice. And I just want everyone to be able to get so excited about what they've made and presenting themselves in something that they created. So,
yes, I love it so much. There are an awful lot of people who make an awful lot of money on us always feeling like it's us and not the clothes.
Yeah.
Whether it's, the people who want to sell you bacteria-laced yogurt so that you have a slimmer tum, to the people who sell clothes in one shape. It's enough to get really mad about, right? It's enough to get really mad about. There are a lot of people, and it's not our friends. Our friends are not the ones making money on us having crappy clothes that don't fit us, and they're designed to make us feel like we're the problem. So, it can feel really little, like adding a gentle A-line to your garment or adding some neck shaping. But the feeling of defiance and embodiment, like this is, like you said, like this is my body. This is something I wrote for it to make this perfect for me. It really is. It's power. It's power. Even though if you just say, we're just adding a neckline, it's a little bit of a journey to get there. But I think that as we knit it, it doesn't feel like it's a journey. It feels really tangibly, concretely critical. It's critical work.
Yeah, it is critical work. And it's moving our bodies to do that work. That's one of the things that I really, I actually think a lot about this in my professional work as a curator. I used to work for art museums, and now I work for a gallery. And the way that I interact with artists has really shifted because I'm in the studio so much more. And one of the things that I've noticed so much is how they move their bodies and the physicality of their work. And it's something that I feel like I am recognizing about my knitting as well, is that it is an embodiment. So just as much as I am making something that will go on my body, I'm doing it by moving my body. And that there's some sort of energetic flow to that, that for me has really resonated. So that it's this connection between mind and body, that's very, very visceral. And I really love the way that this is working my brain in a different way in terms of doing this work with you, in terms of looking at numbers in a way that's not bringing up my like instant fear, that like instant kind of gripping. and instead is actually going to be in my body in a different way.
Yeah, it's like a form of kinetic caretaking.
Yes. Oh, I love that, kinetic caretaking.
And it sounds much fancier than math, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It absolutely does.
For me, I think the thing that makes it the most approachable is knowing where to start, right? Like, if you can just tell me where I'm going to start and where the middle is, and that's all I need to know, I could probably then it seems much more manageable.
Totally.
Right? Like the idea of figuring out what the neckline looks like you're like, oh, but do I need to figure out where it is and how many stitches are there at that point? Like, no. You're just going to knit to that point and put a marker on it. Like, you don't have to know that ahead of time.
Well, I'm going to stop sharing our worksheet just so people can see you before we figure out what's next. And can you tell people also a little bit what's behind you? Because I've been very, very distracted by your beautiful.
So it's fun to see, and she's new around here. We're in release week. And this is like one of my most complicated grading projects to date. Because here's the thing, like we expect a drop shoulder design, and this is kind of like a little, it's got some dolman shaping, but technically, like if I put sleeves on it, we would call it a drop shoulder, right? So it's kind of a little bit of a hybrid. I don't like to color in the lines necessarily with garment construction. But it's, there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to make this garment ready for people who have some shapes to their bodies other than rectangles, right? Like, I think we all have the dream of like what a boxy sweater will look on us. And then we sew up our 2 triangles and then we're like, this looks like 2 triangles on a bunch of curves. Doesn't look that good. And I know that I wanted a little bit more. I love a breezy design. I love to feel like I'm living my inner art teacher, you know, like aesthetic. But I need some room for curves, right? And so this design comes with bust shaping in 4 optional sizes. So that's worked with short rows, and they're all spelled out, or you can skip them if you don't need that shaping there. And you can see that this hem is like parallel to the ground, even though, you know, she's got some curves, right? And so that's what the bust shaping there accomplishes. And you can't really see it, but it lands right about there. We also have just a little bit of A-line shaping here because that's my shape, right? Like, I am wider down here and I am up here. And a lot of us have wider hips than we do bust. So it's very gentle A-line shaping. A lot of people think A-line shaping is going to make their hips look wider. But one of the things that we find is if you have equal ease here and at the hips, you have the same amount of room, you have the same amount of skim. Whereas if it's straight, it's tighter at the hips, and that does make your hips look disproportionate to your body. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with having big hips, but we don't want to have our figures distorted. We want to look like ourselves, right? So that's the goal, is we want to look like ourselves. And then you've got just a little bit of shaping up here with short rows because our shoulders, right, are triangles. So it's higher here than it is here. And so we end up with quite a bit of extra fluff here if we don't make some accommodation for that. And so the final thing that's in there meets the ultimate challenge of the drop shoulder design and grading, which is our shoulders don't change very much as we get larger, but our bust circumference does. And so I'm giving you a whole technical talk here.
I love this. This is so fascinating. I'm completely in.
So a traditional drop shoulder design is, it's bust width all the way up, right? So if I need 45 or 50 inches here, half of that is going to be the shoulders.
Right.
What happens when you get up to a 72-inch bust is it's like 3 feet wide, right? So you have a very different design here than you do for somebody who has a 28-inch bust and 12-inch shoulders, and so it ends here.
Right.
Yes, and so between this gentle little dolman shaping here, the first 6 sizes don't have anything additional going on, and this is size 5, so it doesn't. But in the larger sizes, we keep this pretty consistent. It gets a little longer because we do get curvier, so we need a little extra length. Mm-hmm. But what does happen is we work some increases right in here as a vertical dart so that we get up to this circumference without adding length here, right? And it's all written out. So you don't have to, for the knitter, all you read is work to marker, make one, continue in pattern, repeat 3 times. but there's a lot going on behind the scenes to make it all work. Yeah, so that's going to see, that's the technical side. She's available on Ravelry and PayHip, and she is knit in light fingering because I get hot. And so this is a plant animal blend. It's merino, silk, linen, and baby alpaca, which is a very fine, it's a shirt. It's not a sweater, it's a shirt. So that's who that is.
Beautiful. Oh, thank you for introducing her. She's stunning. Oh, I love it. And Jen, can you tell everybody where to find you? Because like I said, I feel like I learn something new every time I open up Instagram now. And I also just really love reading your blog because I think it's really informative and empowering. I think you're a great writer.
Oh,
so thank you for those. It's really true. You're a beautiful writer. I
really love writing my newsletter, right? And so you can find me on Instagram at jp_knits_things. And you can find my website at jpknitsthings.com. And that's where you can sign up for my newsletter. I send it out once a week. And I try and include something technical in there, some behind the scenes, some inspiration, and sometimes I'll gather some information from the community to share out too. And that's the main places where you can find me this fall. I'm planning on launching a podcast. I have been taking all the scary steps to get it up and running. It's baby steps because I'm intimidated and I'm scared and I'm doing it anyway, right? That's what you do. You just launch yourself into one step into another until you've accidentally done the dang things. That's what I'm doing. Yeah, so you'll be able to find that on YouTube and Spotify when it's out, but it's not out. But my classes, my consulting for knitters, consulting for graders, patterns, all on my website. And I'm pretty active on Instagram.
Amazing. Oh, thank you so much, Jen. I just love speaking with you, and I know that everyone else does too. And I'm so excited to really love this and wear the heck out of it. And I'm also super excited because I think you and I are maybe going to be able to meet in person this fall.
I think we are.
I'm really excited.
Wow.
I'm really stoked. So that'll be awesome.
I'll be able to see it. I'll be able to see your sweater.
I know.
Neckline. I'm so excited.
I better do a good job. I got to do a good job.
It's really beautiful. You've done such a good job with the colors. I am not confident with color, although I have been getting better and working really hard on it as a skill that I'm developing because it doesn't come to me naturally. In fact, my daughter, who's almost 6, will be like, not those two. And I'll be like, you're wrong. And I'll knit it. And she's like, I told you so. She's like, she's always right about color. So I consult with her on awesome. Colors. So, but I have been working really hard. I have some books about color theory and it's coming a little more naturally, but not everything comes naturally. It doesn't mean we're not good at it.
I love that. What a great place to end. Thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate you. And I'm just so excited for our community and to have your voice in it. Just as it's really changing lives and changing the world, just like you said at the top. So thank you for everything you do.
Awesome. Right, keep me posted on your sweater.
I will. Bye.
Hi team, welcome back. Wasn't that awesome? I mean, I really do think that Jen has a whole vision for what feeling confident in our clothes can do for us. So I want to talk a little bit about my finished object here. I'll also be addressing it in my next podcast episode, I'm sure, because I have been working on this piece for a long time and I feel really, really good in it. So this is the Gr8 Gingham Raglan. It is a bottom-up raglan sweater designed by Jessie Maede of Jessie Maede Designs, and I absolutely love it. I think that just looking at it here, and of course I had to pair denim or gingham on gingham. I'm wearing a linen gingham skirt. It was actually a very warm day today, so that's another reason I'm filming at night. But let's talk a little bit about it. It's a really beautiful small rib here. Goes into a color work section all the way up. I did a fairly dramatic increase because I wanted to keep my cuffs pretty small and then knit my sleeves. Joined up with this mirroring raglan here. And I will say this is probably one of my best fitting sweaters. I think that Jessie Maede absolutely nailed it when it came to the proportions of this piece. My gauge was right on. My tension felt really good. I did catch my floats, so I'll do a little float flash. I did catch most of my floats. I kind of got a little, I don't want to say lazy, but I figured it actually was working less. It was kind of less important right around the raglan as these were decreasing pretty rapidly. So I didn't worry about it as much at the end as I did at the beginning, but it fits great. I could not be happier with this final piece. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Absolutely love it. Then when it came to doing the neck with Jen, I filled out that form that you guys just watched us go through and then knit it. I mean, it's basically its own kind of instructions that you add in here. So I didn't do a perfect job, as you can see. There is a little oopsie-doo here that I'll probably have to duplicate stitch over, and also here. But besides that, I'm really happy. This is a little loose, but that's also because of the way I bound off here. So I will probably duplicate stitch over those, but this piece is blocked and fits beautifully. This is exactly the look I was going for the top of this piece. It is quite cropped in the front. I blocked it so that it's a teeny bit longer in the back. So you can see there's a little length here. That's just from blocking. And I frankly do that with most of my finished objects because I find that even when I want the front of my piece tucked in, a lot of times I'll leave it out in the back. Or if I want to throw something on with leggings as I'm taking kids to school, it's nice to have a little more coverage back there, you know? So what else can I say about this piece? I did use Spincycle. The colorway is Cold Comfort, and I paired it with a main color of Chicory from Camellia Fiber Company. Both of those are sport weight yarns. I think they work super well together. I have to say, seeing this on in the camera is making me really, really happy. I feel super comfortable and confident in this piece. It is absolutely something that I will wear and look forward to wearing. And I just love it. I'm really grateful to Jessie Maede for making such a wonderful piece. I find it incredibly inspiring, and I knew as soon as I saw it I wanted to make it, and now I get to wear it. So thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around, for checking in, and I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.